Hello everyone, I'm Shourya, a first year at the National Academy of Legal Studies and Research, or more commonly known as Nalsa University of Law, Hyderabad. And as of posting this video, you have roughly only 2 months left till your CLAT exam. And that sounds like a really tight window, especially if you've not really been serious about your preparation so far, or if you're just now starting, for whatever reason, you're just now starting, or you're a bit underconfident in your preparation so far. That sounds like a really short window of time to get a good rank in CLAT. However, what can you do? What can you do to increase your chances of getting that high rank? Well, that is what this video is going to be about. So, let's get started. Firstly, I want to be clear about my approach in this video. I'm not going to give you any particular timelines that within this week you have to do this, within the next week you have to do this, because that just does not work for everybody. That can give you a general idea of the scale of things, but since everybody has their own way of preparing and their own pace of preparing, those timelines don't really work, at least not in my opinion. And therefore, I'm not going to give you any particular timeline that you have to do this by this point in time. And I'm also not going to tell you, I'm not going to give you a lot of random stuff in the air. I'm going to tell you something straight, no BS, just the most important stuff, just the thing that you need in order to study, because there is a lot of faff, but you need to get away, like you need to focus solely on things that matter, and that is what I'm going to be giving you in this video. I'm going to tell you only the specific essence, the main crux of that which is important, that which is relevant, and nothing else. With that out of the way, let's get started. So, any preparation has two aspects to it, not just for CLAT, but for really any exam in general. There are going to be two aspects to your preparation. That is, first you have to clear your concepts, and second, you have to practice. So, similarly, in CLAT as well, you need to first have your concepts clear, and then you also have to practice a lot. So that is what this 2-month strategy is going to be based on. First, you need to clear all the concepts in all the sections in CLAT. And given that you only have 2 months left, you have to be quick about this, and you have to focus on things that are the most important beyond all else, that are most certainly going to come. Now you're starting just 2 months before the exam is supposed to happen, so naturally you can't spend all your time for studying about every aspect of it, or studying every possible topic. So what you should instead be doing is focusing on topics that are the most common, that come the most frequently, and doing them enough that you have that base fundamental clarity clear. Um, because if you don't have that clarity, how are you going to attempt questions correctly? You can't. You need to have some concepts clear in your mind before you can practice properly. So therefore, your main priority right now in the first few weeks, let's say, or first few days of your preparation, has to be to clear your concepts as well as you can, as fast as you can. Now, the specific time or the timeline regarding this will vary from each preparation to every other preparation, because, as I said in the beginning, you are your own person. You have your own specific preparation. You aren't. I don't know how you're preparing, so I can't tell you exactly how to do whatever you're supposed to do. But like as a general framework, let's say, if you're in school, then naturally you can't dedicate as much time every single day to preparing for CLAT as you can for somebody who's a dropper. Or, as in my case, I was able to get a leave from my school for the entire month of November just to focus solely on CLAT. So if you have that as well, then naturally your schedule will look a lot more like a dropper's than like that of a normal school going student. So you have to keep that in mind as well, that don't like given that you only have 2 months left, it is natural to feel stressed and to feel like you have to do everything all at once, but you have to understand that you can't. You really just cannot, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. What that means is that you have to focus on the more important aspects of it, take a bit of a risk with that, but the chances are that that risk will pay out in the actual exam. So overall, first get your concepts cleared. So that includes like what are the types of questions that are asked in each section, and what are the types of passages that are asked in each section. And also regarding the questions, you have to understand the difference between CLAT and the other law entrance exams, because CLAT is an entirely passage based exam, while most other law entrance exams aren't. So like there can be a stark difference in the type of questions that come in CLAT and those that come in other law entrance exams, even within the same section. So for example, the most stark difference is in current affairs, because CLAT only asks you 5 or 6 most important topics from that year, because they're all passages and you have 5 6 questions from each of those 5 or 6 topics. So therefore you have 30 questions or 35 questions. In other law entrance exams, you don't have that. You don't have a passage of current affairs. Instead, you have 30, 35 one-liner questions, as they're called, which are like completely trivia based. Like, for example, who won what medal in what competition this year in this particular sport? Stuff like that. Or who won this national award this year? Stuff like that. Um, so your approach to current affairs in CLAT has to be drastically different to your approach in current affairs for other law entrance exams. Because for those other OLETs, you really can't do anything other than just ratify, because that is just the structure of the content there. You have to ratify it. Whereas in CLAT, it's still memory based at the end of the day, since it's current affairs. But with CLAT, you need to have deeper knowledge of each of those most important topics, because you have a whole passage based on that and 5 or 6 questions based on that passage, which you don't in OLEDs. Now, of course, there can also like a paper can come like ours came, which didn't really even require a lot of preparation in current affairs, because in a way it was just reading comprehension part 2, because all the answers were given in the passage. But don't rely on that as the ideal CLAT paper that you should be prepared for. You should be prepared for the absolute worst case scenario, which is an actually good paper in which you will be given a passage, but you won't be asked questions directly from the passage. You'll be asked questions which are related to that passage. And so your approach to that has to be completely different to your approach for a one-liner OLED current affairs. So I've made individual separate videos on each section a while ago. I'll attach the link of the playlist of that in the description of this video if you want more in-depth guidance on like what topics are the most likely to come for all those sections. How should you go about preparing for all those sections individually? But keep in mind that that has been targeted for an audience which has already started preparing at least a few months earlier. So you might have to um, get like do away with let's say the nice to have things, but the things that are not necessarily essential, and you have to focus more on those very essential things. um, but that is just part of doing this. Since you're starting just 2 months before the exam, you have to necessarily focus more on the more likely topics. So that is the first component, which is the conceptual clarity. What is the second component? Practice. Regarding practice, don't have this idea that you can't practice until you have the first component, that is the conceptual clarity, cleared. Because if you rely on that, you're wasting a good chunk of your 2 months here, a valuable good chunk of your 2 months here. Because the problem is, we practice for two reasons: one, to revise the stuff we've learned, and two, to get used to the pattern of the exam. So if you only start preparing, if you only start practicing after you've cleared your concepts, you're completely disregarding that second reason for practicing, which is, again, getting used to the paper, getting used to the pattern, getting used to the stress, the mental exhaustion that comes with sitting down for 2 hours straight reading something that does not make sense, or something that just, you know, aankhein phodna basically for 2 hours. It is not fun, but you have to get used to it, because that is the CLAT exam, especially given that it is time constrained. You also have to build that like you have to build that ability to stay within the time limit. And so if you only start preparing after you've cleared your concepts, you're wasting that first few weeks of your preparation. So even if you just now starting out, you don't know anything at all, I'll still say at least give one mock test, give one sectional test for each section, just first to see how the pattern is and how you do with that pattern, and also to figure out if there are any strong suits that you have. Because right now, you have to be specialized. You don't have enough time to work on every section equally. You have to understand your strengths as well as your weaknesses. So, if you give a mock test and you see that you're scoring particularly well in one particular section, you'll have to give less importance or less time or less effort to that section and focus more on section that you see you're scoring, let's say, a bit lower in compared to the average across all your sections. And that's actually the third aspect of this preparation. But we'll get to that eventually. The point here is to practice and start practicing earlier. Don't wait until you're done with your concepts. Start practicing as early as you can. Now, here I don't want to give a particular number that you have to practice this many mock tests per week or this many sectional tests per week, because again, this is your preparation. I don't know how you're preparing. You have to decide the number yourself. And there is no right number. I attempted 28 mocks in my entire CLAT preparation, and I was preparing for 1.5 years. 28 mocks, and I'm here now. So there is no like minimum limit that you have to attempt these many mocks and only then you succeed. That's just not the case. Moreover, every single mock that you do attempt, you have to keep in mind that you give enough time to yourself to analyze that properly. Because if you're just giving mock after mock after mock after mock, without really giving each individual question enough time to be analyzed properly, you're wasting all those questions. Then you're wasting the money you spent on getting that mock test as well. Therefore, more than the number of mock tests, what matters more is the analysis you do for each of those mock tests. And again, I've made a video already about analyzing mock tests and even attempting them. So I'll attach the link of that video in the description below as well if you want some more in-depth guidance. But the main point here is start preparing, start practicing as early as you can, even while you don't have your concepts cleared, because you need to first get used to the paper and you need to also figure out your strengths as well as your weaknesses. Alright? Now, about the thing I alluded to earlier regarding your strengths and your weaknesses. I have always been really, really strong in English. In fact, as you can see, I'm only really speaking English in this video as well as all my past videos as well. I knew that coming into my preparation, and so I didn't really spend a lot of time preparing for English. In fact, I didn't prepare at all for the English section. Not even a single hour was spent preparing for English or attempting English sectional tests, because I was just so confident in my grasp of the English language, and I saw in my mock test, in my full-length mock test, that I wasn't really struggling in English. So I saw that I didn't really have to focus on that, and I didn't. I focused on the other four sections, and I'm glad I did, because otherwise I would be just wasting my time when I could use that time more wisely for sections I was lacking in, which particularly was legal reasoning. I don't know why I just could not apply logic. I don't know why I just could not. So I've spent more time practicing legal reasoning, and that worked. I'm glad I did that, because you need to specialize in that way. You need to understand what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. So there are 3 steps to this master plan. First, you have to clear your concepts. Secondly, you have to practice even while you're clearing your concepts. And while you're practicing, you have to understand and figure out your strengths and your weaknesses. That is it. That is genuinely it. As I said, there is no BS. Straight to the point. What is the essentials? What are the essentials that you need to prepare for CLAT in 2 months? This is it. Genuinely, you don't need anything other than conceptual clarity, practice, and specialization. It is just a repetition of all of those things, especially practice. Practice is all about repetition. I'm sure you know that already. So most of your preparation in these 2 months It's just going to be practicing and repeating the same thing again and again and again, repeating mock tests, like giving mock tests, giving new mock tests, giving new sectional tests, all that. That is going to be the bulk of the preparation. There is no like secret weapon or secret hack uh, to clearing CLAT. It's really all just conceptual clarity, practice, and specialization. And that is generally it. Now, one thing I will add to that is that in the last few days before your CLAT exam, don't study at all. Like, just don't even open a book or anything. Don't even attempt any mock tests or anything like that. For the last 2 or 3 days, studying should be the last thing on your mind. Okay, in my preparation, I didn't study for the last 15 days of my preparation. Like my exam was, I think, on the 1st of December, and so I didn't study from the 15th of November. Now, I wouldn't suggest doing that when you've just started in October, but if you have been preparing for a while, let's say 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, then maybe you can do that. But if you're just now starting, you don't have the luxury of skipping those 2 weeks. What you do have the luxury of skipping are those last few days, or let's say even the entire first week of December. Since your exam is on the 7th of December, you might also choose to just take that entire week off. And that's important because you need to keep your mind clear. You need to stay calm, because the thing with CLAT is, I've mentioned this in a lot of my videos as well, that CLAT isn't like other entrance exams because it does not test your memory. Only current affairs tests your memory. All the other sections are some flavor of logical reasoning. English is logical reasoning about reading, it's about comprehending the passage. That's logical reasoning in itself. Legal reasoning is logical reasoning applied to legal situations. Logical reasoning is, well, logical reasoning. And QT is logical reasoning in a mathematical context. They are all logical reasoning, and therefore you don't have anything to memorize per se. Instead, you need to keep your mind sharp. How will you keep your mind sharp? By sleeping properly, by eating properly, and staying healthy. And this is especially important in the last week just before your exam, because you need to keep your mind in the absolute most healthy state that you can keep it in. So that means sleeping on time, that means not staying up late, that means not eating a lot of junk food, that means eating healthy. All those things you need to do, just because CLAT is a very thinking intensive exam. It's not a memory intensive exam, it's a thinking intensive exam, it's a logic intensive exam. And therefore, for every exam which is logic based, you need to keep your mind in the absolute best state possible just before the exam. And for that, I would recommend not studying for the last few days of your preparation, because it will just, you need some rest. That's just you need some rest. That is just that. You can't study till the last day of just before your exam, because you will be overwhelmed, you will be burnt out, most importantly. And you don't want burnout just before you're giving your exam, right? So, once again, to summarize, conceptual clarity, practice, specialization, and mental well-being. These 4 things, and you will clear CLAT and get a good rank within just 2 months. And with that, that's all from my side. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel and pressing the bell icon as well. If you have any suggestions, queries, doubts, requests, please put them in the comments below. I'll answer them either in the comments themselves, or if I think that they deserve a separate video of their own, I'll make a separate video for them as well. And with that, that's all from my side. Bye-bye.